England, early 16th century. The Tudor court moves like a floating city, Greenwich in winter, Hampton Court in spring, Whitehall in high display. At its center, King Henry VIII, sovereign of a rising realm, bound by law, prayer, and the precarious thread of a single legitimate heir. The kingdom's stability hangs on lineage. Treaties with Europe breathe through a queen's womb and a scribe's steady hand. Between cathedral bells and council chambers, Anne Boleyn steps from the margin to the middle, a woman educated in courts abroad, asked to translate desire into dynasty. The stage is set. Chapel rails, carved stalls, corridors lined with tapestries that listen, wagers placed on love as if on a tilt-yard run. Dawn at Greenwich Palace, 1522. A bell rings once, twice. Linen is drawn back from casement windows. The river beyond is a muscled ribbon, dark and sure. The king's household wakes by custom and chart. Bread and ale for some, baked carp for others. Letters sorted on green baize. A clerk mends broken wax in a bronze spoon, breathing as the seal softens. The court's weather is set by the king's face. If he smiles, the day opens. If he frowns, doors close quietly. Anne Boleyn returns to England a mirror of two courts, Mechlin and France, her accent brushed with French vowels, her manner light but deliberate. She keeps a fan to her cheek when she listens, a small shield. In the jewel at its hinge, a tiny letter, an A, glimpses and gone. Publicly, she is a lady to Queen Catherine of Aragon, pious queen, Spanish-born, the realm's conscience under a dark velvet hood. Privately, Anne is a woman who has seen salons where women speak politics beneath lace, who understands how a glance can be diplomacy and a silence can be refusal. In the great hall, the king is a pageant of energy, hawk on wrist, laughter like a drum, hands quick to sign and quicker to spar. Henry Tudor, crowned at 18, believes in prowess as proof of grace. He seeks glory in hunts and music, in tournaments and theology. He wants his line, a son to inherit a crown wrested by his father, as will, and his mother, as quiet steadiness. Without a male heir, the realm's compass quivers. Cousins sharpen quills and knives. At vespers, Anne kneels behind a carved screen and reads the gold-lit Latin of the Psalms. A candle drips on her glove. She is not a court beauty in the easy sense, but she knows where to stand in a pageant, how to wait out a question until the silence leans toward her. She holds a letter sealed with a signet still warm. Its crease is new. She doesn't open it. She knows the hand. She knows the hazard. In those days, the court is an engine of movement and watching. Pages rush along the privy gallery. A lantern's horn pane glows with the breath of the one who carries it. A herald releases news like doves, light, sudden, impossible to recall. A queen smiles, then lowers her eyes. A lady drops her handkerchief, embroidered with initials small as sighs. The king's gaze lingers on the one who does not reach to retrieve it. A rule made in the hush of etiquette. If you claim nothing, all may be given. Anne makes a choice, carefully as placing a chess piece. She will not be a dalliance defined by the king's appetite and the court's appetite for stories. She will be courted in letters, and she will answer, not now, not yet. She wears a locket high at her throat, plain as a promise. In private, her pen moves with a firmness that surprises the reader. She speaks of conscience, of honor, of law, of the wrong kind of mercy. In the painted chamber, the king takes up a quill. He writes quickly, blotting the parchment with the ball of his thumb. He writes of my mistress and my heart, words that float like perfumed smoke to a place where they may be caught and caged. The seal is pressed, the wax cools. He sends it not by a boy, but by a trusted gentleman who knows when to walk slowly so that waiting tastes sweeter. The specter in the room is not a jealous queen, though jealousy is a shadow that follows all lights. The specter is time, measured in infants who do not live, and treaties written on hope. Queen Catherine has given the king a daughter and years of steady counsel. She has given him prayers sharpened by penitential beads. She cannot give him what Europe and his house demand. This, whispers the tapestry, is where love and law begin to separate like oil and water in a cup. In the tilt yard, Henry rides as if to outrun the question. He lowers his lance, strikes true, splinters fly. The crowd roars. In a window above, a veil lifts, and Anne watches. She has seen princes fall with a smile, seen them fall further when they rise. She is not immune to flattery. Who is? But she measures it, ounce by ounce, against the scale of what a crown costs those who wear it and those who stand near it. The fan closes, a soft click. The game, if it is one, has begun with a gentleman's bow and a lady's refusal. A letter arrives from Rome, or perhaps it does not. A messenger is reported, then not seen. A clerk shakes his head over the wax that never cooled. Rumor becomes a kind of weather system. The king will seek to unbind what God has bound, or he will appeal to a higher court, or he will bend law to love and call it duty. The chaplain's eyes do not lift from his book. Anne turns a ring, a plain hoop, not yet the thing it will become, once on her finger and stills her hand. She is imagined as schemer or saint, depending on the eyes that compose her. In truth, she is a woman in a narrow room with a wide-open door, calculating wins. Desire, duty, vanity, fear. She knows each by feel and taste. She knows, too, that a crown is a mirror that shows you large and small at once. She knows that a promise made in a whisper can echo in a chamber for years. In Whitehall's shadowed corridor, a key turns in a lock. It's only a cupboard where ledgers are kept, but the sound seems to signal something else. Another turning, a new room. The king approaches with the confidence of one accustomed to being welcomed. Anne curtsies, not low, not high. There is air between them. There is fire, too, banked. Between vow and veil lies the narrow bridge they now begin to cross. A carriage that should go to Baynard's castle veers toward York Place. A coachman mutters that the river is faster. A folded note arrives without a seal, edges still damp from the messenger's palm. It smells of wet wool and rose oil. Two ladies exchange glances across a chessboard, and a pawn is moved as if by accident. The court observes, and what it cannot know, it invents. An attendant, one of those careful souls who carry other people, as silences, watches Anne sleeves for a new ribbon. The color tells a story. Saffron, a pageant day. Soft green, hope. Black, an armor of velvet. One morning it is white with seed pearls, a daring kindness to the queen's Spanish gloom. Is the pearl a neutral light, or is it a lantern hung over tension? The attendant does not decide. She simply notes, and the note is a kind of witness. A musician waits in a side gallery, hands cooling on the wood of his instrument. He plays when asked, but the court's music has a second life in rumor. He is seen leaving by the river stairs late. He is seen carrying a letter, or only his hat. He is seen too much. It will matter later, though not as the later stories claim. For now, he is simply one more thread in a tapestry woven by those who watch. A closed door is just a door until it isn't. A parcel arrives, books from Louvain, theology written in a hand that argues, even when the reader is tired. The king takes to study with a prince's energy. He hates to be bested. Anne praises a sentence, then questions it. The conversation grows into an antechamber meeting that others describe as a council of two. Or is it courtship dressed as scholarship? A clerk hears only the beginning and the end, the middle muffled by wood and propriety. Hampton Court's garden paths are raked smooth and broadcast with gravel that crunches like confession. The king walks there with trusted men. Wolsey once, then another. Anne passes by with her women, a cluster of color. She drops a glove. She doesn't look back. The glove lies like a question. A boy retrieves it and hands it to a groom who will later tell someone that the stitching was scarlet. The detail will grow teeth. In Greenwich, Queen Catherine blesses a mealtime loaf. her Spanish rosaries warm in her hand. She knows a court moves on fashion and favor. She has watched them move before. She trusts patience and God, though both feel stern now. She sends for the king. He sends apologies through a gentleman with soft hands and harder eyes. A treaty with a cousin overseas trembles. The emperor's diplomats write letters like knives, folded and sheathed. A portrait is commissioned. The king wants Anne captured, but not trapped. The painter sees angles and shadows and the intelligence behind a steady mouth. Anne sits straight-backed, her ring finger bare, a strand of jet at her throat. The painter notices the way her gaze lifts slightly, as if she is listening to something above the talk. He will later paint her crowned, or a woman he says is her. The panels will darken with fire and time. A small anomaly, a book of prayers with a scrap of parchment tucked at Psalm 27. The words are a fortification. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage. Is the scrap an accidental mark, or a sign between two readers? A lady who finds it replaces it carefully and tells no one. Years later, she will admit she wondered. Wondering is safe. Conclusions are not. Evening. The king plays cards. A servant refills his cup and looks past him at the door where Anne has just stood. The king loses, then grins, then wins. He sends for a lutenist, and the songs chosen are older than he is. Toward midnight, a page enters with a note. The king excuses himself and walks to the gallery where heads are carved into the ceiling. Kings of old, saints, creatures whose eyes follow. He pauses and inhales as if the air itself carries a decision. Then he turns back to the fire. In a household so attuned to pattern, small shifts become signals. An extra pair of candles in the Queen's chapel. A face missing from a hunting party. A ring worn on a ribbon rather than a finger. Those who serve, gentlewomen, grooms, clerks, learn to say nothing in rooms that listen. But they see. And the seeing writes itself into diaries, into letters that survive by accident, into chronicles with agendas strapped beneath their cloaks. One night, a letter is dispatched upriver to a house with a private oratory. The message is not recorded, or if it is, the page is later torn out cleanly, leaving only the ghost of the ink, raised like a scar. The courier wraps his cloak tight against river mist. He will remember the weight of the packet, but not its words. The river remembers nothing. The king begins to sign drafts that ask whether a marriage, once thought holy, was lawfully bound. Scholars receive dispatches heavy with questions and lighter with patience. The Pope is asked to say yes to a thing that would rearrange the chessboard of Europe. He waits. He blesses. He stalls. Queens are daughters of emperors. Kings are sons of God's will. On the waiting, Anne lays her hand, palm down, and does not tremble. Winter in London, 1533. Snow along the river steps melts under the lanterns, puddles thin as glass. At Whitehall, still called York Place by those who remember, an oratory glows with the quiet light of beeswax. The king enters with only 2 attendants. The door closes with a respectful click. Anne arrives by a smaller door, a veil around her face, her breath a brief fog in candle air. The moment is not a pageant. It is a decision shaped into a rite. A priest stands with a book that has seen tears of joy and law's demands. He glances at both faces and feels the room's temperature change. Hands met, words spoken, a ring exchanged. Plain gold, body warm. It is said a vow is a knot tied between 2 names. Some knots are slipped. Some hold beyond intention. They do not claim the world that night. They claim what they can. Each other, witnessed, watched over by a God who hears all voices, even the ones speaking too softly to register in a ledger. Silence around them is a presence with weight. In the corridor beyond, a guard shifts his stance and watches a spider rebuild a web in the draft. Downstairs, in a small room, a clerk waits for a seal that will be needed soon. He untwists the ribbon of a packet, then reties it. a small, fussy act that keeps him warm. Upstairs, the book closes. The priest's hands are steady, though he understands the seam he has just stitched in history. The veil is lifted, not for the court, not for us, for two people who have chosen an embrace with consequences. Henry leaves first, the way a king is expected to leave. Brisk, sure, the corridor quickly empty behind him. Anne waits one breath longer. She reaches for a letter that has been waiting for this answer. Her thumb moves across the seal and she pauses. She does not break it. Instead, she takes the priest's quill and writes a word in the margin, then stops. She dots it, nothing more. That dot will puzzle a reader years later. Before dawn, a mistake is made. Not scandalous, merely human. A small droplet of wax spills from a seal in the clerk's room, leaving a round dark stain on the green baize. When the ledger is closed, the stain prints faintly to the blank page beneath. No one notices. The print is the size of a tear. It will resurface. Snow slushes. The bargemen swear softly at the river's edge. The king's barge is prepared for a journey that appears ordinary. Service here, council there. Anne returns to her rooms, her women alert, eyes bright with questions they will not ask. On a table, a fan, a pair of gloves, a small key, a prayer book. She picks up the key, its wood haft warmed by her hand, and places it in a coffer. The coffer's lid shuts with a sound like an oath. The court hears fragments, a royal bed relocated from one set of chambers to another, the rustle of fresh linen, the curtsy of a household to a new center of gravity. The queen's apartments are repositioned by a sentence no louder than a sigh. In the chapel, candles are added to a rail. Naming begins, Madame Anne, the Lady Anne, Her Grace. Titles are steps. Some are shallow, some steep. Spring dissolves the snow. A procession rides through London with rare pomp. The king's consort crowned in Westminster, June 1533. The streets hung with cloth. The public, excited and divided, pressed into alleys that empty into history. The coronation is both spectacle and argument. Anne moves under a canopy, her gown heavy with meaning, her hair flowing, her eyes lifted to the vault that bears the prayers of the last 100 years. Bells ring, as if they know something we do not. The city notes all, the meat pies seasoned with saffron, the fountains spurting wine, the guilds cheering, the dissenters carving their frowns into memory. A baker's boy stares at the golden letters embroidered on Anne's mantle, H and A intertwined. He will see those letters later in a different configuration, and wonder at the world's rearrangements. For now, the letters gleam. They swear themselves to permanence. We know what permanence means in palaces. It means until. Elizabeth is born at Greenwich in September, a daughter with a cry like flint. Anne watches her child swaddled in yards of white. She touches the tiny ring of a wrist and smiles like a woman who recognizes herself in a new key. The stakes have shifted, but not fallen. A daughter is not a son, say the ledgers of Europe, but a daughter is a beginning. The king visits, looks at the small face, and decides that God's will is a story told in chapters. He orders feasts. He names plans. He names heaven his ally. Not all listen kindly. The emperor's ambassador writes dispatches that paint Anne in colors of manipulation. Others write her in light of wit, piety, and iron nerves. Two truths may live at once in a human. Meanwhile, laws are drafted. Acts of succession. Acts establishing the monarch's supremacy over the church in England. The seals are heavy. Ink stains the fingertips of men who have sworn both to Rome and to their king. Conscience is a door. Some walk through, others stand with their shoulder to the wood and push the other way. Summer heat presses into chambers. Hampton Court's tapestries hold the smell of wool and human breath. Anne stands at a window and watches the deer move like whispered rumors along the tree line. She is ready for a court that will not forgive small mistakes, that will hand them to you wrapped as justice. She knows her allies by name and habit, a brother whose mind is quick, a father whose ambition is a blade, a circle of ladies who have learned to balance kindness with survival. She is not naive. She is brave. There is a difference. One afternoon, a boy returns a ledger you have seen before. He has cleaned it. The wax stain that printed itself from one page to another now appears on a letter, drafted by a minister who keeps his soul like a locked cupboard. He frowns at the mark. He adjusts the text so that the stain becomes a dot over an I. He smiles, pleased with his neatness. Fate sometimes moves like that, through hands that believe themselves merely tidy. Years pass, but in a court, years compress. Events take the space of breaths. 1534. The realm names its own church. Oaths are offered like cups of wine. Some refuse. The consequences are final, and we will not linger on them. The air grows thin around conscience. Doors open to some and close to others. Queen Catherine of Aragon dies in January 1536, far from the center that had once been hers. News reaches the court as a bell tolls. Not for her, perhaps, but the timing reads like omen. The king wears yellow, a color that to some is grief translated, to others, joy. The court divides again in interpretation. Anne notes the ring on her finger and wonders if color is a language that can be misread deliberately. Days later, the king falls at the joust, horse down, man buried beneath weight and shock. He is unconscious, then sudden as breath, awake. Fears bloom and are pressed back into faces with courtly skill. Anne, pregnant, receives the news like a blow, and in sorrow, loses the life within her. The court does not say the word it means. It says only loss. That loss is a hinge. Blame travels along lines drawn long ago. A minister looks up from his papers, his mouth a thin line. He measures affection against policy, and sees that one costs less in the present than the other. He is not a villain from a play. He is a man who believes the realm cannot be governed by delicate things. He begins to collect remarks, glances, patterns that might be arranged into a case. He thinks himself pragmatic. Others will call him ruthless. Words are badges we pin on those we fear or need. The queen and the king quarrel once, maybe twice, through a door that swings between their rooms. Servants hear voices, not words. Silence afterward becomes the heavier instrument. The ring on Anne's hand feels different. It is the same metal, the same warmth, but its meaning has a hairline crack. A hairline can, with pressure, become a break. Rumors begin to breathe in cupboards and on stairways. A gentleman seen late, a jest that clanged, an exchange of favors that might only be courtesy, a musician questioned. A brother, brilliant, beautiful, laughed at by those with less courage. A court stands on this kind of tinder. A spark is not required, only a breath with intention behind it. Ledgers collide with whispers, payments authorized for inquiries. The king hunts while commissioners ask careful questions that look like conversation. A seamstress mentions a ribbon, a timing. A groom remembers a door left open then quickly closed. A messenger repeats, "I think," as if thinking could be held against him. Proof is sought. Proof refuses to wear a hat. The narrative we know coils around absences. Ambassadorships record these days with relish and fear. Chapuis, the emperor's man, writes little daggers onto paper and sends them across channels. He is not neutral. Who is? He calls Anne by a name designed to cut. Others defend her with words that stand straight in the wind but do not stop it. We must say this plainly. The record is a net with holes. What it catches can feel inevitable. What it lets through can feel like the very thing that mattered. A May Day, 1536, soft with leaf and bird. Anne is summoned from the tennis court at Greenwich, laughter on her mouth, and told that the council requests her presence. She comes at once. A ring turns on her finger. Once, twice. She looks down at her hand, then up at the men in front of her. She is asked questions. She answers. Her words are preserved in fragments, through the ears of those who liked or disliked her. She is taken by barge to the tower. The river does not answer questions. Within the tower's limestone hush, she is lodged in royal apartments once built for coronations, not endings. She looks from a high window at Tower Green, where grass grows like any other. Her ladies try not to weep. She steadies them with a glance and speaks mildly, as if her calm could be distributed like bread. She sends small items to be kept safe: a prayer book with a page turned down, a ring in a coffer, a lock of hair sealed into a locket. Objects stay when people cannot. Trials convene in halls that pretend to be impartial and manage to be plausible. Names are read with accusations that smell of ink, not truth. Gentlemen are charged, one a court musician, one a poet with a wrist made for a quill, one her brother, George Boleyn, Viscount Rochford, accusations dark and indecent, stories that live because ugliness sticks to memory better than grace. Confessions are mentioned. The methods by which they are produced are not described in detail then, and will not be here, only acknowledged as a cloud. Anne appears before peers and the law. She defends herself with a poise that makes enemies bite their lips. She is witty, perhaps too much so for a room that expects a bowed head. She cannot saw the floor with her eyes until mercy appears. Mercy is not in attendance. Jurors look at the king's ministers, then at their hands. Verdicts are collections of fear-wearing gowns. In the chapel, a priest thinks of another winter's night and the vows witnessed there. He wonders if vows can be unbound by policy, and finds himself too tired to argue with heaven about it. He prays for all souls involved: the queen, the king, the child Elizabeth, the men accused with her, the counselors who convince themselves they have served a higher order. He prays for the record to be kinder than he knows it will be. May 1536. The city wakes to an absence that will take centuries to name properly. Within the tower, Anne prepares as if for an audience. She is reported to be composed, to be devout, to forgive where she can. She arranges her hair, not vanity, but dignity. She asks that things be made easier for those who must witness, practicality in the place of rage. Her last words are not politics. They are crafted to keep the peace inside a narrative that would rip itself to pieces otherwise. Her faith speaks. Her courtesy speaks. The instrument of the state waits, as it has always done, behind a veil of ritual. We will not describe the act. We will say that it is swift, that the man who performs it is said to be skilled, brought from across the channel, that coin changes hands, and the ledger records it in a line without adjectives. Those who loved her close their eyes. Those who hated her open them too wide. The grass hears and keeps its counsel. A ring is taken up and made to vanish for a time. A locket with a tress of dark hair finds its way into a box that will not be opened until another reign. A letter with softened wax is misfiled, then found, then doubted. A key is left on a table and then removed by someone who remembers that keys should not be left. Objects do what people cannot. They last and mean without names. The king marries again, with the speed of a decision that had always had a path cleared. Jane Seymour wears a different kind of silence. She is praised for it because silence is a quality courts like to see in queens after storms. Elizabeth, the child Anne left, is written down and rewritten down in succession books by men who know how to turn ink into futures. The reign continues. Ships are built. Walls repaired. The weather of policy flows on. And yet, in a closet near a chapel, a clerk pulls down a ledger to make room for newer, larger ledgers. A faint circle prints from a page to his palm, the wax impression that once stained a green baize pad. He rubs the mark and it fades, as such marks do. But it had been there, the echo of a night when two people made each other promises while the empire rearranged itself to suit or punish the idea. Years later, under another crown's emblem, a mason lifting a floorboard in an old house near the river finds a ring, plain gold, silted with dust. Beneath it, almost turned to powder, a scrap of parchment with a dot. No word, only that small point of ink. Legend takes the ring and weaves a romance from it. The record shakes its head, amused, and says, "Perhaps, The ring is catalogued. The dot remains a small weather in the room. In a small chest, unearthed from a wall during repairs at a manor linked to the Boleyns, a locket is discovered. The hair within still a shadow of someone who once breathed lavender and candle smoke. Family stories claim it as Anne's. Historians chalk the lid with the word unproven, then smile. A folded letter in a diplomat's hand appears in Rome's archives. A copy of a royal note, edges browned, seal long gone. The Vatican keeps them as it keeps many human contradictions. Neatly. In a clerk's ledger printed by a press's early teeth, a notation reads, "Payment to a swordsman from Calais." The line is a mathematical thing. Legend would rather it be a curse. Record insists upon arithmetic. The ledger tells the story of a state moving. The portrait tells the story of a woman's eyes still alight beneath cracked varnish. Both are true, in their different ways. Power and tenderness stood in the same room in early winter 1533. They stood again in May 1536. They stand wherever a ring is twisted once on a finger while a decision is made, wherever a seal cools, and a letter is dispatched into a future that will misread it, quote it, dispute it, and sometimes understand. Empires are written with blood and with breath. The breath is what we listen for. Anne Boleyn's name was scratched out of some registers, her emblems pried from wood. Her daughter, Elizabeth, would sit a throne for decades, a singular answer to those who thought only sons carried crowns well. The mother's portrait lives in copies and in argument, the daughter's in ceremony and steel. Between them is a small, remembered shape, the wax seal cooling in the dark.